What's actually more valuable, so specifically in Pipe, one of the things that we are working through right now is because we have this good, we're beginning to get a very rounded out picture of the cash that these businesses are. 70% of your cash is going in of everything that comes out. What can we do uniquely for a following problem, which I think business owners are not even necessarily not realizing that they have, and they're sucking it up in a sense, which is, 4 hours of chores of how do I figure out when I'm going to be short on my payroll.
Yeah, I love this. This is a big problem. This is a big problem. And I don't think traditional, products have done this before. But that's a really great point. And I love the fact that you are not just thinking about the broad, strokes of customers, but these niche industries and how business owners function with their cash in their own world.
I'm Felicia Shakiba, and this is CPO Playbook, where we solve a business challenge in every episode.
We're diving into one of the most urgent questions facing product leaders. How do you build defensible products in the age of AI? Our guest, Claurelle Rakipovic, brings a global perspective, raised in Thailand, now leading product strategy in Silicon Valley, and is at the forefront of applying AI in practical, high-impact ways. At Pipe, they've been exploring what's hype versus what truly moves the needle, from internal testing to embedding AI into core workflows. We'll talk about decision-making and AI adoption, building defensibility beyond automation, and how product leaders can evolve their teams and competencies for this new era. Claurelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Felicia. Looking forward to this.
Claurelle, you've said that AI is quickly becoming table stakes. When you look across the landscape, what do you think is truly defensible in product development today, and what's just a bubble?
In some ways, the analogy that I often refer to is thinking about AI a bit like electricity was in 1905. Everyone had access to the current, and defensibility wasn't in having wires. It was in how you rewired your factory, in how you thought about the problems of what the factory was solving, and reimagined those. And the same is true today for AI. I think at Pipe, what's become very obvious through really real trial and error and being in the trenches, which is some of the short stories I'll share today, it's really recognizing that the models are not are what matters. It's how you structure three main things. One is the context you have, and that context is data, but also domain expertise, knowledge that you're deeply attached to and have sensitivity to. Then there is an aspect of what is customer empathy. And I can tell you that product in some ways is broken for what we need to do today. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's true, product market fit in particular. And that's because the opportunities and the types of things you can do were not possible before AI came around. And so you're not building software with a discrete problem you're solving and a discrete solution. When it hits the user, it has a few different directions you do not expect are going to happen. And so the level of empathy and of customer attachment on the research is really raising the bar, I'd say, for product folks. So between the context piece, the customer empathy piece, and really having proprietary information that others do not have access to, you have a good chance of defensibility. It's really true. I mean, McKinsey just said it recently that 75% of AI use cases are replicable within months, and models will just lap. They'll just lap you. So you need something indispensable. And that comes through these dimensions of context, customer empathy, and proprietary data. Those are the things you need as a moat, but I'd say there are many things you need as a how as well, which we can get into later as well, which is much more about how do you audit what on earth is going on? Because there are unpredictable things that happen. So let's get into that.
Yeah, let's get into that. I feel like there's so much that you shared already, but maybe you could share a story of when you saw a company misstep by chasing AI too superficially. What's the lesson there for leaders deciding how and when to adopt AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think so. I've been at a version of AI for the last at least 14 years. At Amazon, we started in that a long while ago. More recently, now at Pipe, but in the middle also at an asset management company. And in financial companies as well. You have in many ways you can catch the trend quite quickly. There's a lot of data. There's often money behind that. And I've seen a company in financial services learn a very hard lesson, which is they bought the hype in some ways, very, very quickly hired a lot of top talent engineers, got access to GPT, Claude, and a few other models. Within 6 months, we're looking for something that they could build that was production grade. A classic mistake happened, which was they started to work on very, very, very narrow use cases that actually would, in this scenario, it was investors. The models were hallucinating and providing guidance that was actually faulty. And it's very hard to pick that up. Not only that, it was quite lagged. And so there were even latency issues around it. You realize that only some time, and you have to hold back on when you expose that to which users, et cetera. Okay, that all happened. But the reality is that the adoption ended up being zero because you created mistrust out of the gate. And the the irony is that the answer became maybe we got the wrong engineers. Maybe we had the wrong team. And that is really not the issue. I've seen other companies on top of that bad mistake then add consultants and add vendors, and you're still at the same result, which is they're not creating a solution that's any better. And so what they missed is that regardless of what you buy or build, AI is not for every problem. And there is really a distinct heuristic or set of litmus tests, which I can share with you about what I think is that playbook that helps you judge what is an AI native problem I should be solving for. And it really relates to where there is some kind of judgment, prediction, pattern recognition. And you cannot afford to have that answer be even 2% wrong. So there is a band there, but I'd say truly in the scenarios I've seen so far, it's almost throw out the kitchen sink because it's not working, or try to add more things to bolt on related to AI when actually the problem itself first needs to be defined very, very concretely and assess whether or not AI is truly the type of solution you need for this. The simple way to say it is if it's quite deterministic, that's not really what AI is set up to do. It's really set up to give you that gray range on some of the things that you're looking at and assess harder judgment pieces of context. So we can get into some examples of that, but it's pretty expensive to make that mistake.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I have empathy just for the product leaders, because I also feel like customers are constantly coming to businesses and asking, what are you doing with AI? And maybe like you said, maybe the problem that you're trying to solve isn't really AI related, or it doesn't require, deep AI experience to solve, but you're kind of beholden to your potential clients who are really looking for faster, more efficient, more cost-effective solutions, right? That pressure. I mean, is that a pressure that you feel or not really?
Absolutely. I felt it just by the fact that there is so much optical value in some way today to saying that you're doing AI. It's creating valuations you wouldn't imagine in some areas. And I think the challenge there is that you're not really ready and people don't realize the degree to which you're not ready. So if you know about what Pipe was doing, we really decided that, and a few companies have done this very well, from Salesforce to even OpenAI itself. If you listen to their CFO, they actually ate their own dog food on their own models for a while, trying to figure out things that made a very big difference to their value that they were providing in their functions. So even at Pipe, what we've done is we started testing AI internally, and that was a very deliberate choice for a couple of reasons. It is very different from building traditional software in the following ways. in traditional software, you pretty much have a few possible scenarios of how a tool will work. And you solve for that solution and you make it repeat itself, right? When you put something like, you can even define all the possible ways that the user might use that, by the way. So what ends up happening in a scenario where you have a lot of ambiguity type questions. So take something like I was watching a keynote from a VC the other day, whereby a consumer, by the way, had come up with a way in which to take all their QuickBooks data, plus a bunch of other things. They have traffic data about things that are happening outside of their store and new visitors, all types of things. And what they were able to do in one day, a CEO, no engineering background, was take all of that information, throw it into Claude, turn it into, first of all, a spreadsheet that would predict their Black Friday inventory levels that they needed over 14 years of them having operated. Turn that into a app that was an inventory management system. Why am I telling you this story? Because the user now has the ability to create apps on their own. Imagine what kind of bar you need to meet as a product leader who is serving that user when they are the ones who will know that you're being foolish in telling them something in an AI-related app because they have known their business for the last 14 years. And they have the ability to create it themselves. So if you attempt to tell them you think you know what their Black Friday sales is going to be and what their inventory needs to be, you need to be damn sure you know is pretty much as much context as they would know prompting that same tool. That is a whole other level of opportunity set that is possible, and you cannot predict what that business owner necessarily would be asking in all the possible questions. And so you've got to start with, first of all, understanding how these models work. What do they look like when you that you just don't necessarily know what they look like when you put them in front of users and users start asking open-ended questions. And they've got to trust those answers. And so at Pipe, we started with the internal use cases first to learn from our internal users. So those were fraud and compliance agents that were dealing with what have been age-old questions in some way of identity issues and all the sanctions things that we look at. And these are many, many flags that you could never put into your, portfolio of capital and other products that we're providing. But what we were able to do is create a low-stakes way of establishing what it is that the models could do well and where we needed to, more importantly, have evaluations of that model. What did we need to have as a muscle to audit? What was the outcome that we were satisfied with that we would never, ever let a human not see, by the way? Because there are huge stakes if we get something wrong in terms of who we pass through our funnel.
Absolutely.
And so I'll pause there a bit, but it really does come down to, I think, being able to recognize that you have to learn how to predict and prevent failures and not detect them after the fact. And the cool part about where we are today, which is where I was, for example, doing ML with underwriting in 2014, is that you're less in a black box today than you were back then. Back then, it was very hard for me to tell why some of my models were approving or not approving folks. You would only see that after the fact. Today, you have different tools, which are not too worth getting into, but things that you can actually interrogate the model itself and learn. It tells you why it did what it did. So you can create an audit trail of that reasoning. You have to learn that. That's a whole new capability. And so your whole company as well needs to be able to assess that. That's not an engineer or a product person's job. I needed the fraud and compliance operations people to be able to feedback loop to me that something is subtly wrong here. 2% of the time, this is not accurate. But what does that mean? Where does that come from? Why is that happening?
We'll be right back.
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to direct you to a wonderful limited series podcast that Ryan and I recorded live at the ERE Recruiting Innovation Summit. We sat down with 20 recruiting and TA leaders from around the world to hear what today's best recruiters are doing to stay sharp, stay relevant, and stay ahead. It's called The Talent Shift. You'll love it. You'll find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, like, review, share. Do you.
Back to the show.
Now I'm curious to learn more about the team. You've hired product talent with LLM experience, not just traditional PM skills. What new competencies do you believe tomorrow's product leaders need in order to thrive in this type of environment?
Yeah. It's so funny. I think I say this very often, so forgive if someone's heard this from me before, but if you've ever read David Epstein's book Range, it is by far so currently relevant today to what is needed for anyone who's living in an era like ours. So AI is something that demands that you can actually understand the domains around you, because you can be quite powerful as a team of one. I can prototype, I can code, I can design, I can put it in to the market, I can do a number of tests with users with very few other people involved. But that means that I need to not take over the job or replace an engineer or a designer or even the domain expert in my financial areas. It means that I need to have a very deep curiosity and ability to drive into those problem sets to know what's truly a problem and what it means for that problem to go wrong. And that can happen on the core content. It can happen on the design experience. It can happen on the technical possibilities of the model. And so it does matter to be surrounded by what I would consider to be what we did at Pipe is we have a tiger team set up on a number of the use cases that we're solving for. And that tiger team is a tight team of literally only 3 people. And those 3 people are a very deep person who we actually came through our acquisition of Glean AI, where he's been doing a lot of large language model work adapted into true outcomes for customers.
Mm-hmm.
A PM who's been working on large language models in a relatively complex and very data-rich environment before. And then the third is a designer who has had, I would say, a lot of exploratory, very, very, very exploratory early stage financial product experience. But frankly, you could argue that any one of them could be the prototype creator if they deeply understood the other. And so it becomes much more about the being disciplined about what the problem is you're solving for, and then
Right.
having range in terms of how you can think about how those problems touch a couple of dimensions of the product itself.
With a designer, someone with a data rich background, someone with LLM experience, that's a very small team. And I also feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like product teams aren't normally that small. I mean, obviously it depends on how big the organization is, but am I off base here, or is that
That's the starter kit. So from there, you need much more. And I say tiger teams because these pods are operating in different parts of the business. So they're unpicking things on our revenue areas and our customer support. Another pod is doing that on our internationalization. Another pod is doing that on the product compliance, as I mentioned. And I think I'll say fundamentally, you've got the typical parts of discovery and going as fast as possible from hypothesis to beta. What I'm saying is those tiger teams can work extremely well to unpick those problems very, very quickly and create knowledge and understanding in domains of your business that haven't even been touched by AI. What you then need, which is the progression we're moving to now, is a more mature infrastructure that is also run by a team, and that's a different looking team. But it's an infrastructure that primarily actually allows us to set up experiments and create prototypes on a compliant infrastructure. So I don't lose personally identifiable information. I keep certain policies of segregated data, et cetera. And those things you don't want to reinvent every time. But that's another level of investment. And so that's why I said it's a starter kit. If you're really serious and you prove you have the right to play in creating AI experiences that your internal users can operate with, you then have the right to have the investment to create that infrastructure on top. And that's both the auditability pieces, as I mentioned, but ways that you get learning and feedback loops as well for the actual experiments.
Yeah, I think that the team structure and organizational design of the function, I think, is really important. But you've also mentioned that, or you've really emphasized that defensibility isn't just about algorithms, but it's about unique data and deep domain experience. And I think that this is really key because regardless of how your AI product runs, having, the correct input, unique data, I think is part of the product. So can you give an example where this combination created a real product advantage?
The main one that comes to mind is just remember what pipe is sitting on in terms of data for a minute. We're seeing money that's flowing into the business. And we're also beginning to see money that's flowing out of the business because we have products that are financial products that help the small business run their financial life. So everything from capital, where we're underwriting that based on sales information and a few operating variables that we know from the platforms that that are our partners. We're also beginning to see their spend data from the cards that they're using to pay their bills, and the ways that they're paying their invoices are beginning to be true for us as well. So that full picture of their cash is, first of all, a set of data that is proprietary to us. Secondly, we're getting a very nuanced view from the fact that it's quite verticalized. So I can tell you what that looks like for the medical spa segment. I can tell you what that looks like for the restaurant segment. I can tell you what that looks like for professional construction pros. And that alone is creating deep, unique data that we can now create genuine value for that construction well drilling owner about his financial life. And so here's a good example of that. It's you've got him doing things like trying to fill his appointments for the week with customers. You could argue that AI should help him figure out that. It should help him figure out when his invoices are due, etc. But by the way, some of those problems, as I said to you earlier, they're really just time prediction,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When is
Yeah.
my invoice due is just a time prediction. Okay, great. You get a reminder. What's actually more valuable, so specifically in Pipe, one of the things that we are working through right now is because we have this we're beginning to get a very rounded out picture of the cash that these businesses are. 70% of your cash is going in of everything that comes out. What can we do uniquely for a following problem, which I think business owners are not even necessarily not realizing that they have, and they're sucking it up in a sense, which is, 4 hours of chores of how do I figure out when I'm going to be short on my payroll?
Yeah. I love
Because
this.
yeah,
This is a big problem. This is a big
yeah,
problem. And I don't think traditional, products have done this before. But
mm-hmm.
that's a really great point. And I love the fact that you are not just thinking about the broad, strokes of customers, but these niche industries and how business owners function with their cash in their own world.
That's right. That's right. And you have the opportunity in that scenario to really drive outcomes, not activity, not curiosity because you asked something a couple of questions. Literally, we are proving that we can take 4 hours of chores down to minutes at the end of the week because we've already helped you figure out how we can do it for you to close that payroll gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're talking about something that is an informed approach, right? It can come across high trust busting, very dumb if it's not that. So, yeah.
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 So I think we've talked a lot about empathy, and for those customers, how does empathy workflow shape AI products differently than a purely technical approach? Because you're thinking about like how does a product work, but how do you look at it differently for the workflow?
I think, first of all, it starts with just recognizing that the type of workflow you choose, I'm sorry to keep beating this drum, but the type of problem you choose really matters. So the empathy has to come from the fact that you're finding a workflow that has orders of value higher impact on that customer than otherwise. So I gave you the invoice example before versus this, but what you're trying to avoid is that the user feels, and I'll use the word feels, there's a black box and they don't know how to get in on it. Like you're trying to help me get somewhere. You're making a decision on my behalf. You're recommending something. You're giving me an insight, but what the heck came behind that, right? So there's transparency needed. Possibly worse, there's a truly wrong answer that can create mistrust. There's truly irritation because, by the way, so it reminds me that not even a couple of weeks ago, I saw a post it was a woman who had been using a known financial accounting software tool for very, very long, CEO of business, desperately pleading on LinkedIn to ask somebody to please find an alternative. And the reason is because this company had added AI Copilot to her interface. And it was just constantly not allowing her to do the things that she would normally do in the week.
It was a disruptor.
And she could not, yes. And she's just total distraction. She could not even move the screen away.
Ugh.
She couldn't get it to stop giving her and so you don't even begin to know the degree to which there is kind of personalization at another level from a product perspective. And that requires a lot more, I would say, luck in some ways, but also continuous testing. I'm sorry to say it this way, but in some ways, ChatGPT was actually a mistake. There's a good reason why, if you hear from what the leadership did they took a risk putting that out in the world. They did not expect it to light fire quite the way it did. And it could have been something that didn't attach because it's a chat interface. There are many things about chat that are quite limiting. And so the main lesson here is that empathy is something you have to keep at a high bar again, I would say, but you need a muscle around and some guardrails around how you discreetly test into it with true user feedback, because you just need that reaction to both the experience and the actual content itself.
We'll be right back. Back to the show.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think there was an episode we did with PepsiCo about, how do you set up guardrails when you're implementing new, product or services or vendors with AI. And I think that's really important for those who are listening to, if you're looking for guardrails on what to do and how to do decision making, that's a great episode. But I think that you're spot on when you say that you also, as a service provider, need to have your own guardrails for those customers that may not be thinking about all those things. And safety is and should be the number one priority before implementing anything that is providing reason to things that may or may not be true, right? So looking forward, how do you feel that product leaders should audit and evaluate AI in their own organizations to really ensure it's actually delivering value and not just obnoxious noise? Going back to the example that you just shared.
Number one thing is, if you're not creating an outcome, literally an outcome that someone would say, I find indispensable. Unfortunately, a very true product rule, but even more so to today. And I'll tell you why this gets faulty in a second. If you're not creating an outcome, you're doing nothing. And so where this goes off the rails is, say, for example, I think probably Brett Taylor has one of the best examples around this. He's building a company and very successfully already, that is doing customer support in many, many different industries. Even in thinking about how he's priced that, he's priced it based on the fact that you can get a machine, in a sense, to do the same outcome as a human, right? But others have priced based on how much activity the machine can process. And price is really just a proxy of willingness to pay and value you're providing, right? And so even for you, whether it's an internal use case or an external use case, when you're evaluating the value you're delivering, you've got to know that you turn that business owner's financial chores from 4 hours to 30 minutes in a week in some way. You've got to know that that fraud and compliance agent that you created, while it didn't, by the way, for us, we have not gone to the point where we've handed over that. What has become very critical is knowing the juncture on which you do, let the machine do as much of the analysis itself and create that transparency that you can then audit and the recommendation so that the human ultimately can make a choice there. We haven't actually gone all the way. But that alone has created a 60% reduction in our operating needs from a scale perspective alone. And so that is a true outcome that is going straight to our bottom line and not needing us to add additional resources. And it's so very critical when you're going at 5x growth every couple of months.
Is that how fast you're growing at Pipe?
I can't give you the exact number, but
Yeah.
the pace is tremendous. Something that you'll see publicly announced in a week or so. We'll also tell you there's a big step change there coming as well. So it's been a ride.
You're just starting, and I'm just starting. Like that's that's the tagline. Well, Claurelle, I think you are just a brilliant product leader. I think what you've shared today, I really hope that product leaders hear it and they take it seriously. I think that one, smidgen or subtle misstep from that road that you've shared can be extremely costly. Building the wrong thing, creating the wrong experience, or mistrust. Those are true risks of building AI products, among others. And I think, what you've shared today it's phenomenal. Anybody who listens to you speak is just truly be grateful that you've shared with us today. So thank you for paving the path. I mean, what an amazing job you guys have done at Pipe. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely. Just enjoy the conversations with you, Felicia. So really would do it over and over again. Check back in.
That.
Things are.
I know we're going for coffee
on.
soon.
Check back in. Check back in. There's lots going on. So
I will. I'm going to. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I'll talk to you soon then.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
If today's episode captured your interest, please consider sharing it with a friend and leaving a review. To learn more about how CPO Playbook can support you or a leader you know with executive coaching or organizational transformation, visit us at cpoplaybook.com. Your support as a subscriber means the world to us, so thank you for tuning in. I'm Felicia Shakiba. Let's connect on LinkedIn.